Welcome back everyone. Uber Lilith and Tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons have now fallen to my version of Stormclaw in the Season of Blood, and what an amazing journey it's been. An enormous thanks to all of you for your comments, suggestions, feedback, and support, which helped fuel this build from start to finish. The finishing touches required some further optimization to conquer these final remaining challenges, and we'll cover these changes along with some more details about the build, discussing synergies and how they'll affect your gameplay. That way you can decide if this build is right for you. And to be clear, this version still runs tier 90s with solid speed, solos all the seasonal bosses, rips through Helltide, Blood Harvest, and all the other content in game. The previous version does continue to do more damage, but it's at the cost of some survivability, and I mention it because you might prefer it if you don't wish to push the most difficult content. 4 uniques remain in the build, and thanks to the seasonal bosses, these aren't too difficult to acquire, and the build can easily solo all the bosses even prior to getting the uniques, so no concerns there. The first unique is Godslayer Crown, which has excellent affixes for our build, in addition to the aspect which pulls all nearby enemies in when we stun them. This allows our ultimate Petrify to not only give us tons of safety, but work as a DPS burst cooldown as well, positioning everything in a tight spot for us to just flail away on. Mad Wolf's Glyph again has some favorable affixes and boosts our werewolf skills by +3. In the final version here, we just use Claw for a werewolf skill, but it's our main source of damage, so well worth it. Tibalt's Will adds some damage and damage reduction through affixes, but it's the aspect we're most interested in, which is a multiplicative damage boost while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after. By using a pair of boots with additional evade charges and the Metamorphosis Vampiric Power, we can essentially maintain 100% uptime on this damage boost during combat. You could swap the boots for something that reduces evade cooldown per attack, given our fast attack speed, but this is proven more reliable, and by not using unique in the boot slot, you can pick up a triple resist pair. This will help cap your resists off as well. Great Staff of the Crone is the most build-defining piece, and it causes your claw to also cast Storm Strike. This will greatly increase our damage, allow our basic to provide vulnerable, which means we can also swap the exploit glyph out of the Paragon board for something more defensive, and there's one trade-off. Since we'll gain enhanced Storm Strike, we can immobilize enemies, which in turn procs the Godslayer's Crown at unintended times. But overall, it's still a massive boost, and you'll start to recognize the pull animation fairly quickly as you use this build. For legendary items, all the stats can be found in the D4 builds link, but let's talk briefly about all the aspects. Edge Masters will deal basically full multiplicative damage all the time, since we don't spend spirit at all with this build. The boot aspect is somewhat flexible, so if there's something you prefer, don't be afraid to try it out. But Ghostwalker aspect has served well since swapping it in, and the ability to move through enemies after a clunky evade or in order to dodge an explosion has been amazing. Rapid aspect is simply incredible for our build, granting tons of attack speed, and combined with even a small amount of critical hit chance, we're able to keep the benefits from crits rolling for things like Toxic Claws and Envenom. So even if we don't care about the actual poison damage we deal with this build, we do want to make sure it's applied for the strong boost that it provides. Runeworker's aspect and Overcharge aspect will work together. With our crit chance and lucky hit, our Claw will cast Storm Strike and crit frequently, allowing Runeworkers to be active, and lucky hits from Runeworker bolts will proc the Overcharge, dealing some AoE damage. The combination of Hurricane and the aspect duo here is surprisingly enough AoE to clear everything, especially when you raise your crit chance and lucky hit percentages up, since there's no internal cooldown on these. For Spirit Boons, these choices are all pretty straightforward, but if not, feel free to leave a comment with any questions that you may have about these or any other areas of the guide. The benefits we'll gain from these boons are reduced damage from elites, increased crit chance, increased attack speed, fortify when using a defensive skill, which will benefit from our Paragon selections as well, and a chance to reduce ultimate cooldown when using nature magic skills, which includes but is not limited to Claw. Skills, and of course we'll discuss why we made the choices that we did. Fierce Storm Strike provides a very reliable means of keeping vulnerable in the target, and Wild Claw gives us more attacks, which helps keeps everything rolling and adds some consistency to this proc-heavy build. In the next tier, we'll pick up additional chance to crit and movement speed in werewolf form, plus 3 seconds when leaving it, and you should never be out of werewolf for anywhere near that amount of time, so this is just a flat move speed increase. Following that, we grab Preserving Earthen Bulwark, allowing it to make us unstoppable and provide Fortify, which we can turn into more of a boost through the Paragon tree as well. Placing only 2 points into Enhanced Debilitating Roar, this is because we don't need additional self-heal or a slow, since we'll get that through Hurricane. Ancestral Fortitude and Vigilance provide 15% to all resists and a large damage reduction after using Debilitating Roar or Earthen Bulwark, and we'll be using these pretty much on cooldown. Skipping the next tier, we'll grab a bunch in the Wrath tier. Hurricane, which you'll want to typically cast prior to engaging large packs due to its slow cast time. This will deal AoE damage, slow the enemies, and reduce the damage that they deal. Trample, with no additional points. We're simply looking for the unstoppable and its ability to shift us into a bear, which will get more synergy from heightened senses later on, providing damage reduction as we shift back and forth between werebear and werewolf. 1 point in each neurotoxin and toxic claws allow us to gain tons of damage from envenom, which is a multiplicative effect despite what the tooltip says. A couple of 1 point wonders and 2 points in Bad Omen for a chance to deal some additional burst damage based on procs. This is essentially the final points that I spent. If I had an additional point left over, I'd have placed 3 in Bad Omen. At the next tier, Defiance, Natural Disaster, and Resonance all increase our multiplicative damage for Claw, and Natural Disaster is just the better option to place 1 point in on our way to Resonance. 3 points in Heightened Senses for the damage reduction as we shift between forms, as mentioned before, and only a single point in Quick Shift. Many people think this is a permanent boost, but it actually only boosts the first cast that transformed you, so there's no need for more than a single point to move through it in our build. Ursine Strength has been a huge boost to this build. We're shifting fairly often, and that allows us to reap the benefits of the skills, synergies. Now we'll get additional life, and while healthy, which is incredibly often in this build, given all the self-healing we have, we deal 25% more multiplicative damage, just a huge boost. For the ultimate, you actually have some flexibility, and you can swap on the go. Petrify is the go-to for high-tier Nightmare dungeons, while Cataclysm is great for lower-tier speedruns, and Lacerate is invaluable for Uber Lilith. Moving 2 skill points is very simple and can be done on the fly. Without changing Paragon boards, gear, or anything else, is simply fantastic. The Paragon board, which is always far easier to digest with the D4 builds link, uses glyphs that either provide multiplicative damage boosts or reduce damage taken. And there's actually some flexibility to the glyphs depending on your preferences, but this setup, which is taken from Aceofspade's version of the build, is a really well optimized and somewhat defensive setup, perfect for tier 100 or Uber Lilith. The Vampiric Powers grant us self-healing, increase attack speed, damage, move speed, cooldown reduction, and unstoppable. And I've listed them on the screen for you. I've messed around with all of them, and these 5 give the most consistent results, but the powers are really strong this season. You could most likely swap some others in and have a lot of success as well. Thanks again for coming along on the Stormclaw journey. Leave a comment if you'd like to see other Druid builds or even another class covered this season. And as always, thanks for taking the time to watch, and enjoy the build.